Assassin's Creed is Ubisoft's crowning jewel, with 12 main console titles accumulating over billions in around 15 years. Naturally, over the course of that decade, the franchise has had to innovate in order to stay fresh amongst competitors. However, the newer titles have changed the franchise so much that it's unrecognizable. For some, that's good, but for others like myself, it may mean goodbye. This all began after the underwhelming performance of Syndicate, where Ubisoft decided in 2016 to give its cash cow, the Assassin's Creed franchise, a break. When it returned, it evolved into a role-playing game. This new shift was obviously trying to mimic the success of CD Projekt Red's The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and the results were fruitful, as the first release within the new genre, Assassin's Creed Origins, was received well by most fans and critics. However, a sourness towards the RPG shift was born a year later with Odyssey. Many critics adored the final push towards an RPG, with dialogue choices and a focus on mythology being more apparent than ever. Yet, many fans who loved the original games felt it steered the franchise away from the foundations of its own creed. Odyssey's evolution to an RPG has now seen franchise iconography become sparse, and grounded outlooks to history, science, and gameplay abandoned. Therefore, it comes across as if Ubisoft no longer care about the original fans, focusing on attracting newer ones, specifically those who never liked the franchise originally. I'm not a businessman, but it doesn't seem sustainable to market towards a group of people who were never loyal at the beginning and still won't be, as all they see these games as is nothing but fun. Nothing meaningful to fight for, nothing to form a cult-like following as the original games did. Regardless, there is also no avoiding this sensitive topic, but politics is playing a big part as to why this franchise is becoming messy and unimportant. Maybe not in the way you're thinking though. Before, the franchise never shied away from gripping stories that dug deeper into philosophical struggles that pertain sometimes to politics. In fact, at its core, AC is one of the few games that has a free rein to be political, since it's about the fight for liberty. The central themes for the franchise demand daring exploration of various ideas, yet newer releases have sat in the murky middle ground of trying to dabble into everything without pushing too deep, with the hope to avoid hurting anyone's feelings. But by going only surface level and appealing to everyone, they've just made something that doesn't speak to anyone. I can understand the company's fear nowadays, with the political climate more volatile and toxic than it's ever been. But if done correctly, the product will usually prevail on the right side. At least, I hope. I miss playing an Assassin's Creed game that always had something to say, whether it was executed well or not. This shallow messaging in current games couldn't be more present with the uninteresting dialogue. All iconic, thought-provoking quotes from the franchise have been born from older releases, whether it was Altair saying nothing is true, everything is permitted, or Ezio saying,
"When I was a young man, I had liberty, but I did not see it. I had time, but I did not know it. And I had love, but I did not feel it."
Now though, we have Malaka as the most iconic quote from recent releases. Doesn't that speak volumes? The dialogue and messaging isn't the only thing taking a nosedive, but the quality of the gameplay is questionable at best. At a fundamental design, they're pretty decent RPGs, but they're far from being good, and especially far from being anything fresh. For example, the actual dialogue implementation is rough. Characters like Cassandra or Alexios, depending on who you picked, feel empty. I can't help but notice how defined a character Bayek feels in Origins, and in contrast, how ambiguous the lead character of Odyssey feels. When playing as a character who has been living in the world before you've begun to control them, they should have a set personality, and so dialogue choices should represent that. But in Odyssey, Cassandra's choices feel completely varied and different, which sounds pretty good until you realize by the end of the game that you still have no clue who she is. Valhalla does a better job at defining the main character's personalities by narrowing the range of dialogue options to what Eivor would potentially do. However, the result of this begs the question, is there any need for dialogue choice, considering it felt inconsequential in Valhalla? Maybe there is a middle ground where it can succeed, but that's yet to be achieved. Personally, I feel a better resolution is to leave dialogue options out of the main questline and instead implement it towards side stories. I don't see many games doing that, mixing the two genres of linear storytelling with RPGs, which speaks to the idea of innovation. Believe it or not, Ubisoft were once the innovators of the industry. Their parkour traversal system in an open world was done in a way not many had implemented. What helped is the fact that there was actual depth. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop was not just an analog stick push as it is now. Instead, you had whole button combinations that could always give you greater control and an edge in various scenarios. The movement now, though, is just a means to an end. In fact, I'd like to draw your eyes to the Spider-Man games made by Insomniac. Though vastly different in the expansiveness of which movement is desired, the principle of depth towards traversal is what every studio should strive towards. If you played these games, you know how easily you'd get distracted by just swinging around, and how fun simple chase tasks were. Swinging was not just a way to get to a destination. If you were aware of the movement system, you could get to places faster and smoother. In AC nowadays, I just find myself fast traveling or hopping onto a mount with my eyes closed till I reach my destination, and it works. The immersiveness of their worlds have also become shallow. In fact, this is an aspect the franchise has always found difficult, but lately has gotten abysmally worse. NPCs have acted as NPCs, not as virtual characters trying to at least mimic a human lifestyle. Granted, older games did not have the technology to perform such complex tasks, but newer titles don't have this excuse. Black Flag is one of the few AC titles where the world justifies the cliché, a living, breathing open world. Besides that, they're all just pretty looking worlds with not much happening, nothing dynamic. To be fair to Valhalla though, it does a decent job of improving the function and design of its world to the player. Cities like Jorvik are fantastically inclusive of parkour. It's just a shame that those mechanics are as shallow as bedrock. Combat is another aspect the franchise has struggled to get right. Under their heydays, the original game set a strong blueprint to build from. A combat system that has elements of the Flash of the Ezio trilogy and the difficult realism of the original. Yet, even then, the balance was still off, but as I said, it was a great place to build from. However, it has teetered more in the direction of epic, mind-numbing violence. There is no Flash anymore, or grounded realism. Combat looks messy, even glitchy, with animations being incredibly janky. Begrudgingly, I have to compare it to Ghost of Tsushima. The swordplay feels exactly like what Unity tried to achieve, a balance between eye-flattering combat and difficulty that demands skill and attention. Tsushima's combat has all the beauty of a classic samurai film, but also encompasses varied enemy types requiring deeper combat mechanics, opening a pathway of difficulty and leading to a learning curve. What helps bring Tsushima's combat all together is polish, being able to refine animations and systems, something that Unity desperately needed, and if it had it, we may have been looking at a game that resembles elements of what Sucker Punch achieved with its samurai game. What naturally doesn't help is the Anvil engine the games are built upon. This tech has been used for so many recent titles. The franchise is really overdue a massive refresh mechanically. At the end of the day, something that really epitomizes the sloppy direction of Assassin's Creed and how rotten it has become is the fact that microtransactions are now everywhere. The home screen misses a huge opportunity to leave a lasting impact on the gamer. When you play The Last of Us, you have a desolate room with nothing but foliage. You feel something. The game has communicated a tone without you pressing play. AC though has had the same screen littered with advertisements for the add-ons and microtransactions for far too long. The only feeling I'm getting is that you want more money from my wallet. Assassin's Creed is so far away from what it was that it feels like an entirely different franchise now. The story seems to be lost and directionless with no end goal. The gameplay feels uninspired and predatory on the wallets of gamers. It's fair to say Assassin's Creed in 2022 is a mess.